Good day, everyone, and welcome to this chat that we usually have every evening, where we talk about pertinent issues that are affecting us, especially during this COVID-19 induced lockdown. And today, our focus is going to be on education, where we've seen that all schools have been closed, and locked down during the lockdown. And the minister actually said that. Um, Parents are supposed to continue paying school fees even if they're not getting the same value that they signed up for. So today we've compiled a few experts, parents, and yeah, just as people, just to discuss around the idea of studying from home. And also we are going to also focus on the inequality aspect, to say there's so many people that don't have access to broadband. So is this situation going to exacerbate the inequality that exists in our society? So I'll start off by introducing, in fact, you're going to introduce yourself. Brian, please just introduce yourself. Brian, can you hear me?
Thanks, yeah, I can hear you. Thank you very much. My name is Brian. Like you said, I'm a parent. I'm also a consultant in the learning space. So I guess this is a very pertinent platform for us to have this conversation. So I'm curious to hear what other people have to say, and perhaps put our heads together and find a way forward.
Yes, thanks, Brian. Definitely, we want to hear insights from you, considering that, I mean, at ALX, you guys are working across the continent of Africa, delivering programs, learning programs, that is. So yeah, so definitely we want to hear your insights. Then we've got an education entrepreneur who's been building platforms for a very long time, Mr. Alan Mushabe of Lightbulb Education. Alan, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, so I'm Alan. I am the founder of Lightbulb and the Lightbulb Education. Lightbulb in itself is a learning management system. It's a system that allows schools, educators, individuals, and maybe even corporates themselves the ability to deliver online education through technology. So we basically go around providing like white labeled support services for people to basically migrate to their entire educational and training services onto online methods essentially. So for us, it's a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to the idea of schools and payments and so on. On the one hand, from a business perspective, it's really great for us. On the other hand, I can understand the reasons around why it's important to obviously still have these educators and so on, but I'll talk more about that as we have the discussion. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, nice. Thank you. And next, we have Geraldine Mamburu, who is a marketing manager at Accenture, but today she's here as a parent. So she'll give us the perspectives from a parent's view. So Geraldine, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, it's I and everybody else. I suppose there's not much to add there, given seeing as for me. But I mean, you're absolutely right? So tonight we're wearing the hat of a parent, and also to share a number of anecdotes that I've also heard around my circles and other people in similar situations. And, I think it's about time we start bringing this conversation up to the front. We've heard what the minister's saying. We can see what the schools are doing, but no one has come to us as parents who are being affected as well to say, guys, where do you stand and what is your suggestions in terms of moving forward? So I'm here to add my 2 cents to that. It's I.
Nice. All right. Okay, so let's get into the first question, right? And any of you can just answer. Should parents pay school fees during lockdown? Let's start there. I don't know who wants to start with that one. Anyone?
Well, I can give it a shot, right? Because I'm sitting here as a parent. So I think maybe just to give a bit of a backtrack, right? So I think when the schools, and I'll speak mostly from the position of my child's school, when the whole lockdown thing happened, I think we were all sort of short-sighted, and we thought that by the end of April, this thing is going to come to an end. So come when term 2 was supposed to start and the schools came along and said, look, we're going to introduce virtual learning, I think in most minds it was going to be a 2-week thing, 3-week thing. So it wasn't too much of an issue. We're trying to juggle to see what's happening. But now we're sitting in this lockdown a month in, and we're looking at this going on for more months to come, right? So I think it's high time we start having the conversation to say, look, we did agree initially because I think we were quite short-sighted. We didn't think it was going to last as long as it has. But seeing where we're standing now, are we now getting value for money for what we initially signed up for? I mean, schools are now talking about contractual agreements when you want to start having these conversations about either reduced fees or even pulling your children out. And I think that's being very underhanded in the sense that we're all facing this lockdown together. So to start wanting to go back to even the conversations about contractual agreements is a non-starter, given that as a school themselves, they're failing to also bet their portion in terms of agreeing to what they were supposed to do, and understandably so, because of a global pandemic that is, on both parties, in terms of control. So, yeah.
Okay. No, that's quite amazing. Brian, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, you went there. I mean, this is the question: should we pay fees during lockdown or not? It's a very difficult question. I think it's we have to look at quite a few things. Where do I stand right now? It's I'm in the middle. I mean, there's two sides to this story. There is one of access to online services, and then the other side is those that don't have access. So it's trying to get the two together. But so on the one side, I'm thinking in the short term, what is it that we can do? This thing came as a surprise to everybody. So perhaps in the short term, what are the couple of things that we can do to keep learning happening? And unfortunately, given where we are, the online seems to be the solution, right? But on the flip side, not everybody has access to online. We are in a bit of a quandary. And this is driven really by the fact that lockdown solution to COVID-19 is a one-size-fits-all solution, but it doesn't work in an economy like ours. We've got very social differences. Our socioeconomic very different. So we can't apply this Band-Aid solution to everybody, because some of us may have access to resources under lockdown. For others, it means they can't. They need. So we need to take a broader look at this. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, what is disruption, right? If COVID-19 has brought about disruption, much like Uber brought about disruption in the taxi industry, perhaps this is what disruption looks like. So if this is disrupting the long term, perhaps we need a new model of learning. New motivation often comes with better price points, better value for the customers. So myself as a parent, if I'm now having to do a bit more of the work and less contact with my teachers, then therefore I should be paying less. But again, on the flip side, what about those people? So it may proliferate our already huge. So it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what really makes out of this. So we have to look at it one as an innovation and disruption, but innovation is optional, right? Not everybody can jump into an Uber. So those that can't jump into an Uber, what do? They need to continue with in-person sessions.
Yeah,
that's what.
Okay, nice. So Alan, what's your take?
So so for me, it's when it comes to like things such as like costing and all these type of things, I feel like a restructuring is something that can be done, and it is possible. I mean, we looked at this a couple of years ago when we were busy trying to look at implementation into like rural areas and so on. What's the costing exercise for deployment of services and the infrastructure for individuals? Like the internet infrastructure is pretty much covering a good chunk of the country anyway. It's just the access to devices and data networks or like SIM cards or whatever. But that's not a problem. But if you work it out and you say the average child, and let's just take a high school The amount that's going to be spent on them, on textbooks, on notes, worksheets, things that the government has to subsidize in order for them to actually continue their learning, it equates to quite a lot of money over a 5-year period. If you're taking, like, just say grade 8 to 12, for instance. So we worked out and we said, look, I mean, if you buy a tablet for the child, the tablet could normally last you about 5 years, and that should be able to replace all the infrastructure in terms of costing that you would require in order for that child to actually get like learning through, because you don't change your device. Obviously, the information on there would change from year to year, but the device doesn't have to. So you can restructure the budgets accordingly. And I mean, you know, decent devices can be about 1,000 Rand. 1,000 Rand for 5 years, that is not such a drastic cost on the government to per se. The biggest issue is obviously going to come down to things such as electricity and charging. But with the way that you know, like infrastructure from like the grid and how different parts of the you know, South Africa is probably one of the most well lit or lit up countries in the world, in Africa, in terms of access to electricity. And even then, more so, there's access to things such as like solar chargers and things like that, which can also alleviate some of these burdens that people will have. So from the point of saying that it's not available for everybody, I don't necessarily think that. I think that it is possible if people actually put their minds and their money in the right places. It's possible to get it done. If you cut out all the wastage that happens, it's possible to put in place like an actual program which will actually take South Africa to the digital space. With regards to the current, your sort of middle to high income environments, I still think it's important to pay the teachers because they actually do provide like a service. Like teaching is, in my mind, very subjective. It's not like an objective thing. Like each one is, some teachers are very good, some teachers are, you know, need some assistance, but there is value in what they offer, each one individually. So aside from like the infrastructure parts that people are, you know, taking on the cost of like managing the school and the caretakers and all the other things, from the educational point of view, I still think they add value. The experience, the ability for them to engage with the students adds a lot of value to the child's actual understanding of whatever subject matter that they're covering. So it's important to sort of still keep them in the loop and to still have them being paid, essentially. When it comes to all the other overheads, I think you can reduce on that and at least make it more affordable up until you get to the point where, you know, you get back to school and you can then start doing the other things. Because I still do believe stuff such as like sports and physical education also adds value. But in this particular COVID environment, they are not necessary. They're not like must-haves at this point.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to try not be complex, not be complicated, but to say, when kids were going to school, I was paying for socialization to make sure that the kids are playing with other kids, because technically from an information and knowledge perspective, there's something that is called the disintermediation of information that happened with the revolution of the internet. Now you find that you get more information on YouTube, you get more information on Google. Kids are learning far much more without their teachers, such that the role of teachers, the role of the school is actually changed. So now, if I was paying for my kids to socialize with others, what am I paying for right now, considering that they are not out there mixing and mingling with their peers? I don't know, Geraldine, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Idzai. And I think what you've said also touches on what Alan just said just now in terms of, you know, other activities that our children are exposed to, such as sports and the like, right? So that forms part and parcel sometimes of some structured school fees payment. So that has been taken out of the picture, but maybe perhaps the school could come back and argue to say, no, but we've spent the money on setting up Teams or Zoom and the like to be able to accommodate to children. But it speaks to, you've also just said that my child has probably been exposed to those platforms as it is and learning more. And I feel as a parent, I'm missing out on some of the aspects that I had signed my child up for school. So I think the schools themselves needed to have this discussion with parents, especially for grades where, you could literally just take your child out if you decided to for the rest of the year, if it wasn't a pertinent stage, such as perhaps a grade 7 or a grade 12, right? So I think that's a conversation that schools needed to have with parents to say, you have a 4-year-old or you have, a 10-year-old. What do you think? Is this virtual learning something that is going to work for you as a parent? And let's have that conversation and say, maybe, yes, perhaps it will work, but given that it's not 100% what I signed up for, let's have a discussion about a discount, because as it stands, it doesn't make sense. And, like I said, I will give an example. My little one is 4 years old, and we are doing online lessons, so you can imagine trying to have a class of 4-year-olds sit still for 15 minutes, and you are given homework that you're supposed to do. But meanwhile, I still have to carry on with my job 8 to 5. When am I going to have the time to take up the teacher's role? Because in essence, she's prepped her lesson for the week. She comes in for about an hour and a half or so in the morning to cater for the kids. But I think the conversation then needs to steer back to, are we getting value for money, given what we had initially signed up the children to go to school for? And maybe let's start there.
So do you feel, Geraldine, that maybe you are now the teacher and maybe you deserve to get paid for teaching?
I think at this rate, call me a principal even, because, veterinarian, I am mom, I am literally everything, and I think that's something that the schools are not also keeping in mind. And I think maybe even going back to the financial aspect of it, right? So this thing is sort of two-pronged. So there's the value for money aspect. So fine, maybe my business might still be going well. Maybe perhaps my employer is still paying me well and all of that, and I can still afford to pay. But the conversation about value for money for me as a parent still needs to be had to say, do I feel like I'm still getting value for money for what I'd signed up my child for? And the second part of this question is there's also the financial aspect, right? So parents who are now stranded where businesses have also gone down, or businesses are completely shut down and you can't operate. And yet the government and the school still expects you to be paying 100%, but meanwhile they're busy offering business relief but you are still asking the same parent to be funding the school and so forth. So my question is, the schools have same access to these business relief funds and all of that, UIF and the like. Why are they also not looking at that avenue instead of keeping on coming back to the parent to say, pay your school fees? I mean, we're all affected in the same way. Why are they not looking at us parents to say, how can we help you in this situation?
Okay, Brian, since you're the Pan-Africanist in this discussion with the African Leadership University, you guys span across the whole continent. And we know that the story in South Africa might not necessarily be the story in Ghana or in Chad. So how can we solve this inequality that has been brought about by the sudden digital transformation induced by the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think Alan kind of alluded to some of the things that we can do, right? We have to reduce wastage, especially from the government side, to give access to everybody. Because at the moment, we have a very uneven playing field. Some schools in South Africa will go back to school this week, right? Because they've got resources in place to assist them to do that. But others, it's still a toss in the air. They don't know whether they'll go in May or they don't know whether they'll go in June. But again, to Alan's point, we need to make our resources much more available across the country and across Africa. If somebody from down under in South Africa can make a call and has got internet access, surely we can give our kids that live far away that same viability. But if I look from a teaching perspective, and that's why in my opening remarks I'd said that there's both a short-term and a long-term solution to this. I think in the short term, because this came up as a big surprise, we should still continue to pay what we're supposed to pay for the balance of the year. That's one side. But we need to at the same time be making up for our long-term plans, our long-term strategy, because this is innovation. What are we going to do? One, we need to make sure that internet is ready and available for everybody. Two, teaching jobs are probably going to be more.
Okay, Brian, I wanna cut you short there and just interject where I'm saying those are lofty ideals. They are good. We need to have internet for everybody. But right now, we are 39 days into lockdown. Those kids without internet have lost 39 days. And those parents who are paying for this period, but they've not received value. What can you say about that? So we want solutions for now and solutions for the future. Like what one of the viewers has asked, Dikeledi Carol Mojapelo said, what about the fees now and not in the long term? Can we discuss that? So maybe if you want to respond to that, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's there's no one answer to some of these, right? Because, like I said, there's a socioeconomic divide that we live in. So it depends on access of parents, etc. But the governments have to play a bigger role. In as much as we've got a solidarity fund that's giving SMEs, can we give back to institutions to allow us to have these solutions right now, today? That same fund should be made available in order to accelerate their learning and allow our kids to catch up on the time that they've lost. In as much as we're doing for business, education is a big part of it, and I think that's really super important for us to solve our problems in the short term. In the long term, we need to have more inclusive decisions, more inclusive solutions, like I mentioned. Perhaps in the short term, parents are paying what their commitments are, and now while the schools review what is it that they need to do, and pay or refund the parents on some of the systems. So, or maybe look at levies, or etc. There's an array of solutions that they could come up with, but they're all dependent on one institution to the other. There's no blanket approach, unfortunately, that I foresee in South Africa, because our schooling system is very different. It's not the same across the board.
So Alan, I know you've been developing systems for learning online way before this rush that's been caused by the COVID-19. So in terms of design, because what I've seen is that some of the teachers are not equipped from a pedagogy perspective, from a delivery perspective, to say this is how you teach online, this is how you use material online for maximum engagement. So basically what schools have done is that they've taken their offline model and just copied and pasted it online, and it's not as optimal. It's not achieving what they want to achieve. So from a design perspective, how can you help parents and teachers do better in that aspect?
Yeah, so we've actually seen this quite a bit. In fact, even in some of the programs that we've been doing for our, like some of these other, we have like an F&B type program we're running, and even they themselves, they normally have like these workshops which are held at their campus, and we are essentially supposed to go there, and now they've tried to convert to digital, and it's horrible. And I'm constantly telling them, like, guys, you can't be trying to sort of just replicate everything. You've got to like figure out like what works and what doesn't work, and try and sort of, it's like there's specific ways of doing virtual teaching and learning without having to make it too what's the word, overly complex and boring for the individuals. Because the worst thing that a lot of people forget is that with teaching you must have some form of engagement with your learners. Otherwise it's you're not really doing much. You're just presenting YouTube videos and so on, and hoping that the person pays attention. And that's like the big mistake which a lot of things that I've seen recently are making. And so what we tried to do from our side is we tried to look at these in depth over the last couple of years, and looked at to see what actually works in terms of actually getting people to learn and to pay attention and to actually get educated, but also at the same time to try and make it easy for those who aren't that computer literate to be able to engage quite easily. We find that on average, obviously, the more older teachers tend to need more help in terms of getting things online. But then the main aspect about our particular business, especially here in South Africa and Africa in general, is we have people online to support them, to help them to figure out what is it that they need to do, what are they trying to achieve, what are the objectives, what would you normally do in a normal lesson, let's see how we can help you digitize and make it virtual and make it more effective in terms of your approach. So you got to have those support systems and services in place in order to try and get people to do that transition from the physical sense to digital. Right now, everyone's just like, they've got no inclination about how to do it, and everyone's just being thrust into it completely, and it's just causing utter chaos. And we've seen this at all levels, from the corporates to schools. It doesn't really matter. It's just been quite a disaster. And unless you have, like, a decent understanding of technology, even just things such as like Facebook and so on, if you can operate reasonably well, you'll be able to find that transition and work through it. So there was another question. So there was something that somebody said I wanted to just give a comment on. Oh yes, the payment component. So what we've seen, and it's a very, very complex question. And the main reason around this, it really depends on where you sort of fit in your sort of like income level structures. Because I'll give you an example. I mean, I came across a couple of schools in the Western Cape, like in like the Cape Flat and so on, where you have like schools in quintile, I think 1, 2, and 3, which need a lot of government support, but they also get help from a lot of the parents and so on. And in some cases, these schools are running on deficits of almost 3 million rand and so on, which, I mean, the money that they do get, they try to subsidize just to pay the teachers that they have. And then you have like your quintile 4 and 5s, where like your top end private schools, top end public schools, which have a huge amount of cash flow available, and they're able to sort of ride out these sort of services. I mean, these sort of periods, essentially. So it's a bit dicey when it comes to like deciding on a blanket approach for should parents pay or should they not pay, because in some cases, like little 10 rand that the person gives or whatever goes a long way. Whereas if you're paying 250,000 rand a year for your child to go to big estate school, like they're not going to feel they have enough of a cash budget available in order for you to survive this entire period. In fact, so much so, these big schools, you could almost have one teacher per student at that rate, and you wouldn't have a problem, so to speak. So it's a very complex question when it comes to like, should parents pay or should they not? It really does. And also, I can understand if my child is going to a sort of a quintile 4 and 5 school, and I've been paying a certain amount, I would expect that, hey, I should be able to get a discount right now because we're not using a lot of the infrastructure, we're not doing a lot of the things, and there's a lot of wastage which is going into stuff which the kids are not using anyway. So in cases, yes, but then in the cases whereby the schools barely are making it, that's a different argument.
Yeah. Okay, guys. It's been amazing. Just maybe in closing, let's say you had 5 minutes with the Minister of Education or the decision makers within the education sector. What would you say to them in those 5 minutes? But obviously you're going to say it in less, right? So we'll start with Geraldine. What are those things that are on your mind, that are on your heart, that you want to let out and rip out and say, you know what, this is what I demand of the education sector?
Yeah, I feel like I should put on my boxing gloves, but taking it far, I think, just concurring with what Alan has said, so absolutely correct. There is no blanket approach that you can use. But I think, first of all, it's a conversation that needs to be had between parents and the schools. We've got SGBs and parent boards and stuff like that for a reason. So the two things that I would say to solve this problem in the short term, we understand we need to put in long-term solutions, but for now we need to deal with what's here on the table. So the two things I would say is, let's consider revising the fees based on the value for money that we're now getting. So that could probably be in reference to maybe schools where parents are able to offer virtual learning for their children, right? And then second, I would say bring in the topic about temporary suspension as well. So we're now coming from a perspective of value for money. Do I feel that what I'm going to be paying is worth it? So therefore, I should have the option to pull my child out for the rest of the year if I feel like I can. And secondly, there's also the health aspect of it. So we're all being told, stay and continue working from home if you can. But why would I then let my child go out there and face, the pandemic? So I think for me, those are the two things I would like to discuss with the minister. Let's look at revising the fees based on the value for money we're getting. And let's also start having a conversation about temporary suspension for those parents who feel that they're just not, happy with the way things are going.
Nice. Well put, eh? Definitely will deliver those demands to the minister. And we'll ask you to bring your black boxing gloves as well. So, Brian, your demands from the minister.
Yeah, I think the ask here from the minister is very good. I think, just given everything else that we've spoken about. But my starting point will perhaps be, I think our entire education system needs a total revamp, right? Because I don't think we're developing enough skills to service innovation, right? We continue to get job seekers out of our schooling system instead of job creators. So we need to, our education system is based on this antiquated model, right? Which, puts the STEM at the most important, etc. I think now we need to look at more of the skills of creativity and innovation, so we can come up with ideas to solve ideas that solve the kind of crises that we're in. So that'll be my first introduction, is to relook our entire education system so that it can cater to this. But the second thing is as we approach the COVID-19, what solution can the government give to people that aren't able to access in online systems? Maybe have a structured approach, because I get the sense at the moment it's different schools, different people. There's a lot of socioeconomic imbalances in South Africa. So we need to have a level playing ground so that our kids can benefit for the future. So that'll be my two critical areas of concern.
All right. Mr. Allen, your demands, please lay them bare to the minister.
Oh, it's quite simple. From my side, I say create a virtual school, a virtual public school. Make it available to anybody that wants to be part of it. If they're going to be paying fees, make it like a low fee component if needs be. You can structure it in different ways to have like various experts on it if you want. Just to manage and make it available for everybody. Like, just to say, here's a solution if in case you can't get access to a school and so on. This is an option for you to actually have like to get your full education from the beginning to the end, and it is possible. And yeah, they just need to start working on it and actually try to treat it seriously, because if they probably did and had like an option available, then they wouldn't be in such a big problem as they are right now.
So if I get you right, you're saying that we need one school in the cloud that everyone taps into, and we don't have to have different systems, different schools using different systems. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can have a singular sort of like repository with a range of experts in the various grades and subjects, having them available for engagement and discussions, and make them decide on the curriculums and the courses that they're going to be like putting through every week, every day, and have that available for the general public to just engage and say, okay, today, like obviously we can't go to school, but if I need help with, I don't know, grade 6 history, then here's the curriculum, here's the expert, here are the people that can assist me in actually like getting my child educated through that. Same thing with like early childhood development. Here are the programs that they need to be following, set step-by-step guides with experts in those particular fields, all digitally available, and not just what they're currently trying to do is say, oh, there's all the Khan Academy videos, and here is what was the other thing? Sorry. Oh, and here's some past papers from some books, because it doesn't teach anybody.
Yeah. So you know what? You raised very valid points there. And so in closing, I just want to say the world has changed. And this pandemic has just exposed us to the fact that we are not ready for the new world. People talk about the fourth industrial revolution, but the truth is that most African countries are still in the first, second revolutions. We're still far away. We have not been able to catch up. We don't even own the means of production. So I'll go back. I remember the other time I got into trouble at the African Union. I actually stood up and said, you know, the problem is that we were colonized initially, right, in the 1800s, wherever, right? And we're beaten, right? Because those guys came in, they were more technologically advanced than us. And then we fought for our independence, we fought for our freedom, but we didn't take time to actually understand why we were beaten in the first place. And now there's a second colonization through technology that is happening, but people are not seeing it. We are happy when you and I come up with these apps and put them on the iStore or put them on the Google Play Store. But who owns the means of production? What is the new means of production that exists in our world nowadays? It's the Apples, the Googles, the Huaweis who are coming up with the base systems, with the platforms that we are playing on top. Because right now, as we stand, Google, Facebook, Twitter, no South Africa, no Africa better than the African governments themselves. In fact, they are in a better position to tell us what we are thinking better than the government. So who is the real government? So if we're going to use third industrial revolution thinking in today's world, we're not going to get anywhere. And it's important because our people are not understanding what business models are there, what platforms are working, how are they working, think something simple like an API changed the world, right? It produced seamlessness on the internet. And it's important that even our educators today even ask themselves, what is the role of a teacher? Because back in the days, teachers were these fountains of knowledge that kids would come into class as empty heads, and then they dissipate their knowledge to the kids. But nowadays, kids know more than the teachers. In fact, the teachers are so archaic on average that we have to rethink the role of a teacher, right? We have to think, what are we getting? When we say I'm going to Oxford and paying lots of money, or going to Wits or Gibbs, what are you paying for? You're paying for the badge. There's nothing that Gibbs can teach you that you can't find online for free. In fact, you will get something that is even better. So we need to be serious about revolutionizing education in Africa and using technology to the max, but making sure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the amazing talk. And I hope that we'll continue the discussion. And this video will be there available on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. And let's share it and make sure that as many people partake in this conversation, and hopefully something will come out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Itzai. And I think as per the hashtag that trended a few years back, fees must fall. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, cheers.